this is Nafeesa Moloobhoy, and it is my privilege and absolute pleasure to be the moderator of this session because we have with us all the bigwigs and the marine stalwarts as our panelists. And I'm so honored to be your moderator. Our topic for today is best practices in diversity. We have with us 5 very eminent personalities on the panel. We have Helene Tofte. She's the Director International Cooperation and Climate at the Norwegian Shipowners Association. Welcome, Helene, and lovely to have you here. We have with us also Captain Rajesh Unni. He's the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Synergy Marine Group. Namaste, sir.
Thank you for having me.
The third we have with us is Kristine, Christina Leach. She's the Managing Director of Jotun Paints India Private Limited and is based in Mumbai. Welcome to our panel discussion. And then we have Mr. Prakash Thangachan, who's based in Copenhagen, Denmark, and he's from Maersk Tankers. So we welcome you. He's the Chief Human Resources Officer at Maersk Tankers. And then we have Mr. Romesh David. He's the CEO of South Asia Gateway Terminal. SAGT, as it is also called, is a container terminal transportation and shipping service company located in Port Colombo. It is one of the 3 container terminals operating in Colombo Port. Sir, we welcome you and thank you for joining this discussion. We understand, gentlemen, your time is very precious and the audience is looking forward to your input. So I'm going to hand over the...
Thank you so much and a very good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. It's a great pleasure for me to take part in this conference and discussing this very important issue. As you said, I'm with the Norwegian Shipowners Association. I'm an executive director with the organization and responsible for our international work. The Norwegian Shipowner Association is an interest organization representing Norwegian companies within the shipping and offshore industry. As you might know, Norway is a country known for doing quite well when it comes to diversity and gender equality. However, when we look at industry in general and the shipping sector in specific, which is the focus here today, we are not doing so well when it comes to gender balance. And that will be my focus here today and to try to share with you the experience we have done in working on this. What we do is as an organization is that we measure gender balance among our members. We have approximately 135 members, and we ask them every year about gender balance in their companies. The figures says that in total, around 16% of the employees in Norwegian shipping companies are women, and only 7% of the employees at sea are women. And having this overview is an important first step, the way I see it, because if you don't have the overview, if you don't have the figures, it's hard to know if the situation is getting better or worse. So to share with you my first learning point, to call it that, I think it's important to measure and to keep track of the development if you are to work with gender balance and equality as such. When you have the figures, what we did was that we asked the question, is this a problem? Is it a problem that there are so few women in shipping? And if so, why is it a problem? And to help us answering these questions, the board of my organization established a task force with top management from several of our member companies and headed by our president at that time. And I believe that is an important point as well. And perhaps a second learning point to share with you, that if we are to achieve better gender balance in our industry, it should be championed by the top management. And in this task force that our board established, we also had representatives from Vista Norway and from Young Ship, which also was very helpful in order to bring in different perspectives to the debate in addition to the perspective of top management. So let me just say a few words about the outcome of this work we've done and the principles that we are now working and are in the process of implementing. Firstly, what the task force did was to be very clear on why it is important for us as an industry to achieve better gender balance. And the simple answer they gave to that question was because we need to attract the best people. We need the best people to come and work for our industry. We are facing great challenges and opportunities in the years to come. We need to digitize, we need to decarbonize, and we have to make our industry greener. And if we are to achieve this, we really need the best people, the best heads. And then it is simply not sufficient only recruiting from half of the population. So a third learning point for me would be that it's important to be clear on why we are doing this, why we are focusing on gender balance. When we had established that, the task force said, okay, how do we get there? How do we achieve results? And they pointed at 3 different perspectives. What our task force said was that 1, we need to recruit more women to our industry. 2, we need to motivate more women to stay in the industry. And 3rd, we need to get more women into top management positions in the industry. So that was also important to establish these three stepping stones. And to achieve this, we are now implementing, or we are in the process of implementing, some very clear goals and some action points. And I want to just mention a few of them briefly. So what we've done within the organization, we have established a goal to have at least 40% of each sex represented in the different boards and committees by 2025. So in order to get 40% women in our boards and committees, we need to do a big job in the years to come. But it's also important to have these clear goals and to communicate where we want to go and what we want to achieve. We will also be working to increase competence among our members, among the ship owners that are members with our organization. And we will be doing seminars and webinars on the topic of diversity and gender balance, and how the companies themselves can work to increase gender balance in the companies. Then we're also participating in a mentor program, which was launched only a few weeks ago, which is called the Maritime Meetup, which is also a cooperation with Vista Norway. And we started working in new networks in order to attract new talents to our industry. So that has also been a very important step for us. And lastly, I also want to mention that we are now working more actively also to showcase the great opportunities that comes with working in shipping. Because if we want to attract more women, we need to show them why it is interesting for them to work in these sectors. So these are the steps and the goals we set ourselves and which we are now working to implement. And as I said, we're also measuring these things. So I hope that you will invite us back in a year or two so that we can also report on the progress we've done. So just very briefly to summarize, what I would share with you today is that it is important to measure and keep track on what you're doing and the development. That's the only way of saying if you are doing better or worse. That we need to have top management involved if we are to achieve better gender balance and diversity. We have to be clear on why it is important to focus on these things. And we also need to establish some clear goals and action points for how to achieving this and to measure ourselves. So that will be my short introduction. And I'm looking forward to discussing this issue with the rest of you more in detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. That was really informative. And you spoke a lot about giving data and collecting data. I did, as I said, I researched for this afternoon session, and McKinsey's research on diversity showed that companies with more diverse gender, culture, and ethnicity outperform employers that don't support diversity. The research found that companies in the top quartile for gender diversity experience outperform by 21%. And for cultural and ethnic diversity, there was a 33% likelihood of outperformance. Do you think diversity in workplaces actually enhances performance and thereby increases profitability? Is it that it's just this thing that we are going on about women, 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 and we want to bring in more women into the maritime industry? Or is there an actual data that supports and says that yes, you have gender diversity, it brings about 21% increase in performance, and then profitability, you bring about, you only mentioned gender, but we can even include ethnic diversity, things like that. So what is your take? Does it really lead to better performance and profitability?
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. And I think it's, as I said in the beginning of my introduction, I think it's very important that all organizations are very sort of clear when saying why this is important. For us, we are not doing this because it's politically correct to do, or we're doing this because what our members is saying, we need the best talents. We need, as an industry, we are facing a lot of problems to solve in the years to come. We simply need the best people. And that's why we cannot only recruit from half of the population. We need more women on board, and we need to be able to attract them and bring them into the industry. So I think that's a very important point, why we are doing this, and we're doing it for our self-interest.
Okay, so that means you're doing it because you need more people, and men are just not enough, and we now have to tap into the bank of the working bank of women. And you also feel that it will lead to an enhancement in profitability and performance.
Yeah, and not only more people, the best talent. We need the best people, and then we also need more women.
Okay. And you also said something about motivating women into and luring them into our industry. So can you give me an example of that?
Well, we as an organization, we are talking a lot about these two big challenges, the way we see it: digitization and decarbonization. And I think that's topics that that interest not only women, but the population as such. And we need to show the population what we are working on, how we are working to reduce our emission and to transport goods in an environmental and climate-friendly ways. We need to show these big issues that are important for people as such, and why they should start working in our industry. Because I think many young professionals today are interested in and care about the issues that shippings are now dealing with and are facing. So in order to attract the people, we need to show the big challenges and the big opportunities in this sector. And I think that's important to get and bring the people in, and to make this an interesting industry to work in.
And on a last note, on a personal note, you being a lady, what lured you into the marine industry? Was it circumstance? Was it by choice? How did you come into the shipping fraternity?
Well, I think as a starting point, it was more a sort of by coincidence or by chance that I saw this very interesting job. But I must say that I find it an extremely fascinating industry. And for me, the perhaps driving force to stay in this industry is that it is so global, so international. It's a great industry to work in. And also that we are sort of a key to solving some of these problems that the world needs to solve when it comes to environment, climate, when it comes to sort of how to develop and how to bring the world forward. And the world depends on shipping. More than 80% of all world trade is transported by ships. So we are in an industry that is key for sort of bringing the world forward. And that's the driving force for me.
Yes. Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much. Prakash, if we can go to you now, and if you can introduce yourself and make your presentation, we're very, very eagerly looking forward to it.
Thank you, Nafeesa. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
All right. So maybe I'll just quickly start with my own introduction and quickly go there. From there, I'll take it on. So my name is Prakash Thangachan. I'm the Chief Human Resources Officer for Maersk Tankers. I sit in the executive team for Maersk Tankers. In my role, I'm responsible for human resources as well as for our operations in India, where we have a shared services center. So the topic is very important for us. And what I would like to do is to primarily tell you, to start off with, why it is important, and then get to how are we approaching this. And it's a long haul, primarily because it's not something that you can solve in a short while, because we are working in an industry where there is a talent crunch, especially when it comes to talented women workforce. So to start off with, maybe I'll start with a brief introduction to the company. We are a 90-year-old company, but at the same time, we are only 3 years old. In the sense that we used to be part of the AB Maersk group, which is a fairly large Danish conglomerate. And in 2017, we got spun off as an independent company, which essentially meant that we inherited a lot of the capabilities that we got spun off with, but it also meant that we had to find our own feet, our own purpose, and our own direction in which we wanted to head. We primarily operate in the product tanker shipping market, which is a sub-segment of the shipping industry, and the importance Helene just mentioned about, saying that it is a great enabler for global trade, or ensuring that energy security is met across the world. We're based in Copenhagen, but we have operations in India, in Singapore, in the US, and to some extent in Romania as well. More importantly, as a company, we are a ship owner, as I mentioned, so we own around 80 vessels. We do technical management for them, but we are also a commercial manager for a lot of third-party ship managers, and it's a partnership that we're really building on. And the reason for building this partnership is our understanding that we cannot do this alone. Our purpose in terms of really transforming the shipping industry, especially the product tanker shipping industry, can be only done in collaboration with capable and competent partners. And for them, we manage around 224 vessels. These are product tankers. We have 33 partners whom we are very proud of being associated with. And together as an ecosystem, what we're really focused on is taking on the responsibility of ensuring that we can reduce carbon dioxide emission. Shipping is by far one of the most efficient modes of transport, but we still have a long way to go in this. And we can do this primarily through our focus in terms of better decision-making, which is based on algorithms, which is based on data, and digitizing the way we approach our business. For this, we have actually invested quite a bit over the last couple of years. We have just spun off a company called Zero North and entered into a joint venture with Cargill, primarily focused on bunker optimization, which is a huge a source for carbon dioxide emissions. And this is a new software as a solution company. So it's a spin-off, a digital spin-off from a shipping company, if you have to really look at it, which has essentially meant that we have needed a different way of solving problems, which meant that all the capabilities that we inherited as a ship owner was not enough. We needed to bring in people from different skill sets, different mindsets, and get them to work together. And Nafeesa, as you earlier mentioned, there are two concepts in this. One is diversity, which is essentially the mix, the different kinds of people who come together. And then there is an important factor called inclusion, which is primarily creating a culture where people of different walks, different demographics can come together. They can feel a sense of belonging, and they have no need to cover up their true selves, and they can contribute fearlessly and to create an innovative culture. And that was one of the key reasons for us to really focus on this. And we were, of course, supported by a lot of research and data which exists. I mean, we don't need to recreate the science around it. A lot of good companies like McKinsey and the Stanford University, Accenture, they have done innumerable research on the fact that, if you have a diverse pool of people, and if you create a culture which is inclusive, then you are more innovative, you are more productive, people are more engaging. If you have a lot of diversity and you don't have an inclusive work culture, you can create a disaster for yourself. So the idea is, how do we ensure that we create a good environment so that we can cultivate different ways of thinking, and how can we bring them together for innovation was one of the main reasons for us to really make this a business priority. So it is not just because it's the right thing to do, or this is what the UN's goals talk about, or it fits in with our values. It's primarily because it's a business imperative for us to innovate and to transform ourselves into a service-minded company. So as a part of this, there are two, we focused our efforts in 4 broad areas. The first one, we said it has to start with leadership, where it primarily meant that as leaders, we needed to stand up for this cause. We need to be able to talk about it. We need to advocate it, both internally and externally. And we needed to talk to employees about why this is important. So the moment you talk about diversity, one of the most common reactions you can get is from the majority to say that, are you really excluding us? So we had to put together some principles around it, saying that we would be fair in our approach around recruiting, around promotions, around we take people decisions so that nobody feels excluded just because we are focusing on diversity. So which essentially meant that we had to really train our leaders on how do you manage diverse teams? How do you attract talent who don't look like you, who don't have the similar experiences as you, and how can you be humble enough to reach out to help for partners when you think that you may not be the best person to do this particular transaction. The third was, so this was on the softer side of it in terms of what we call as behavioral inclusion, changing mindsets. But we also understood that you can take out some degree of bias from the human mind, but the human mind is wired to be biased. So you needed to also work on some systems, processes, policies to ensure that there is bias which is taken out of the workplace. So to do that, we ensured that we actually took advantage of the COVID, work from home protocol. And we said that, listen, if work can be done from home quite effectively, why is there still a bias against working from home in different parts of the world? So we came up with a more forward-looking return to work policy, which enabled employees to take 40% of their time to work from home. And this enabled and ensured that we could give a more inclusive work environment, a more flexible work environment for our women colleagues, who were the ones who made use of it mostly because there was a lot of responsibilities that they had to take care of. As long as the work was being delivered, we really didn't want to get into how and where the work was done. We also then ensured that we had a common paternity leave policy rolled out across the globe, primarily to ensure that we can emphasize that the fathers also have an important role in early childcare, which is very critical because a lot of times when women's careers really gets backtracked is after the maternity leave, because they end up taking time off. When they come back, a lot of the responsibility on childcare goes in women. And we identified this problem and said that we need to flip it, at least with the men in our offices, saying that they also have an equal responsibility towards childcare at the early stage. And last but not least was to really look at managing talent. We really recognize that we don't have all the talent pool that we require to solve the problems of the future, which is digitization, which is decarbonization. And for that, we needed to attract people from different industries, different mindsets. And for that, we had to market shipping. So we are out in industry forums talking about the importance of shipping, collaborating with Danish Shipping, which is our industry body here, and Danish industry, really talking about why shipping is such an interesting field where you can have really fulfilling careers. And we also adjusted our recruitment processes to ensure that we can take out, typically in job descriptions in shipping are very male oriented. So we actually use some degree of artificial intelligence through a tool called Develop Diverse, where we could weed out masculine sounding words so that they can be a little bit more appealing for people who may not be from the industry and who are especially women who think that they can have a good career in shipping. So we're still making progress. We're still at an early stage. Just to give you an understanding of where we are, we started off this journey with around 11% of our workforce being, 11% of our leaders being women. We have moved that needle to 18% over the last 8 to 9 months. We're really now focused on getting to 35%. That's a stretch target for us. We would achieve almost 40% in our board of directors with certain inclusions that we were able to do. And we have also tried to make changes in our executive management. When we had an opportunity of our chief commercial officer, the easiest for us would have been to go to another shipping company and possibly look at recruiting someone into that role. Our approach there was that, okay, we have shipping knowledge within Maersk Tankers. What we need is possibly someone who knows how to run partnerships, someone who knows how to drive customer centricity. So we looked into the telecom industry and we were able to recruit a female CCO into the role. A big risk, but that's where I think our CEO and our board of directors had that conviction, saying that we should also hire for skills and potential rather than pure past experience. So my personal reflections, just to end the session here, I think it comes down to a couple of things. One is you need to have courage, because the easy thing is not to do anything and believe in incremental growth. The second is to commit. You need to have targets. You need to be able to measure them. We believed in the principle of fair hiring. So we said, anytime you have a replacement, you need to go 50-50. That's all we said. We didn't say that you have to hire men or you have to hire women. As long as you have, say, 10 vacancies in a year as a leader, your target is to hire 5 men and 5 women. And it could be different for different positions. And last but not the least is to live it, both in terms of principles of inclusion, but also ensuring that there's avoidance of unconscious bias in all decisions. So that's our journey. We're still, as I mentioned, at an early stage, and happy to take any questions that you may have, Nafeesa.
Thank you, Prakash. That was really enlightening. And I must say, Maersk really walks the talk, because I believe after Mazhar left, you've brought in Biju John as the managing director of Maersk Tankers India, and that really proves that it's not all there on theory, but you're actually practicing it, and that really impressed me. So full marks to you and your team, and I'm sure you must have had a very big role to play in that selection. I have a couple of questions, especially because you're an HR person. Do you find that when you have this kind of diversity in a company, does it help retain employees? I mean, everybody spoke of diversity helping profitability, performance, etc. What about retention of employees? Does diversity help in retention of employees and talent?
So diversity in itself does not help in retention of employees. But if you have to make diversity work, you need to have an inclusive work environment. Inclusive work environment is one where everyone feels a sense of belonging, does not have to really cover up, and they have equal opportunities for growth. That kind of a positive, inclusive work environment drives engagement and it drives retention. And there's a fair degree of studies that we've been able to prove on that. Our turnover rates, ever since we have been on this journey, has also indicating that yes, it makes a big difference.
Okay. Prakash, another thing that I was curious about is that you also have a very big onshore office staff, and of course, Maersk lines and ship tankers, etc. You have people on board the vessel. Do you have the same policies for both the employees on shore and those who are working on board a vessel? I mean, would you say you have the same principles, the same missions, the same goal sets, and you view diversity in both these locations in a similar way?
I would say yes and no, primarily because it's a little bit more challenging on the sea side of things. And primarily it is driven by workforce availability. When we are talking about 35% goals here, it is much lower than that in terms of, it is 2% at this point of time
2%.
on the seaside. So we have a long way to go if you really look at it. But then diversity is also, when I look at it in terms of having that philosophy that diversity is good, inclusion is something which unlocks the performance and productivity. I think that also holds from the seaside. But you need to have certain constraints from a business standpoint, from a standpoint of being able to attract talent, and also be able to propagate that in different country structures that we operate in. So the answer to that, Nafeesa, is that yes, but it is a little bit more challenging on the seaside than it is on the shore side.
Correct. And a last question before I go on to the next speaker is, you mentioned work from home. Did you find that there was a difference in men working from home and women working from home? I mean, what is your take on that?
I think there is a big cultural thing around it. In Denmark and in the Nordics, it's a little bit more accepted for people to leave early, go pick up their kids from the kindergarten, and then log in a little bit later. But if you left early from India or in Singapore, people would have a certain degree of bias saying that you're not really putting in your full effort. So for our offices in Mumbai and Singapore, it was very important for us to have a flexibility policy, which was very clearly defined, so there was no biases against it. And normally, what we have also noticed, even in Scandinavia, that women played a much disproportionate role in taking care of children compared to the men. So that's something that we had to really actively address through our communication, saying that the men also have an equal role to play. And we brought in a lot of speakers from the outside, role models from industry leaders as well as from other industries, which talked about the fact that a father's role in the upbringing of a child is very important. And there have been research studies done in Sweden, which we were able to kind of quote and correlate quite a bit in this. So that is the reason why we wanted to have a flexibility policy, which was more even for both men and women, and avoidance of bias around it.
No, but if you talk of productivity, would you say when you're working from home, a woman is as productive as a man, or how would you answer that?
I would
I
say
think
that,
it's
we saw that during I think during the COVID period of time, we did a lot of work with our employees where we did focus groups. We really asked them questions, anonymous basis, etc. The concept of productivity when working from home depends on a lot of things. One is, do you have kids still at home? Do they have access to to schools and kindergartens at that point? Second is, how is your home office set up? Do you have internet connection? Do you have those kind of things? Do you have a room for yourself? Especially, it was a challenge for us in Mumbai, which has real estate was a big constraint. So we did have productivity drops and some of that. And that was not because they were men or women. It's just that, the family unit, the infrastructure makes a big difference in productivity rather than just the gender split, in my opinion.
Okay. Okay. I mean, because you're such an HR specialist, do you think that there is a very big difference between, let's say, the Western women, when I say women in Europe or America, and because you have offices all over the world, and let's say Asian women, like women in India or Singapore or China or something like that, do you find that there is a very big productivity difference or commitment difference or loyalty difference? Because then you're talking of gender and ethnic or nationality diversity. So is that something that you would like to speak on?
No, Nafeesa, I personally don't believe in stereotypes. I don't believe in national stereotypes. I don't believe in gender stereotypes. And I do not have any data which shows that there is a productivity difference basis nationality or the social system. So I wouldn't really like to comment on it. But I think what's very important is that everyone needs to get a fair playing field. Everyone needs to get a fair shot at being able to deliver on their goals and equal chances to progress in the organization.
Thank you so much, Prakash. That was really interesting. And I'm sure my panelists will have your co-panelists will have a lot of questions for you at the end when we sort of sit around and have a free discussion. My next speaker is going to be Captain Rajesh Unni, and I had the pleasure and privilege of introducing him myself. Sir, I'm not giving you the privilege. I'm going to do it for you, okay? One of the key voices to emerge in global shipping in recent years is that of the Synergy Group founder and chief executive, Captain Rajesh Unni, who feels that shipping needs to find a political voice that travels beyond ports and the high seas, one that reaches the decision makers who are currently determining our collective fates. He has been outspoken about the need to reform and has highlighted the need to find ways to create a more transparent industry. Under his leadership, Synergy has made a clear commitment to increase female representation at all levels as it strives to be a truly balanced workplace, both ashore and at sea. So welcome to our discussion. You're a very eminent personality in the maritime fraternity, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. I understand that, you'd rather that we just ask you questions and you'll reply, and I'm looking forward to your valuable input. My first question to you is on gender bias. Do you agree that in the shipping industry, especially the seagoing workforce, which is so male dominated, as Prakash said, women make up just 2% of the global shipping workforce and less than 1% occupy leadership roles, there is a gender bias and a gender pay bias? How is Synergy handling it? Just for the benefit of our viewers, we've had Helene, who's from an association. We've had Prakash, who's also is an HR expert and part of Maersk. And now we have Captain Rajesh Unni, who owns a lot of ships and runs them. So we are very interested in your take and your perspective on this gender bias and equal pay for men and women.
Nafeesa, the only thing I have listening to Prakash and the others, right? I am the least qualified here. The only thing I have is I think I have the courage, perhaps maybe a little bit of commitment. I'm trying to live by that commitment. And when you talk about biases, from where I come from, I went into a boarding school which is predominantly boys, mostly boys, if not a couple of maybe girls. And then I went out to sea, which was again the same. And then my wife tells me that I definitely am not sensitive to what the needs of maybe women are. So the only source of information I had was some books. And one of the books got me thinking, perhaps, and that's this Daniel Kahneman's book about thinking fast and slow. I'm sure a lot of people have read it. And he categorized this simply into two systems. He says system one, where decisions are generally taken immediately without thinking. And system two, he categorizes where, demands some thought before we make a decision. And the biases, I think, have a huge impact on the system one. And there are, of course, different types of biases when we start even interviewing people, whether it is about stereotyping bias, whether it's about, or it's first impression bias, or is a similar to me kind of an effect when somebody walks in. So there is this kind of a bias that comes in. And then also, we have data today. So we have we kind of build in biases when we frame this data for discussion, And I'm saying framing bias, when we say, for example, we say we have a vaccine that has 90% successful trial. Are we talking about that 10%, which are also maybe relevant? So how do we frame that? Or, sometimes when we neglect the base rate. For example, you say 10% of infection happens in India and 10% happens in some other part of the world. What's the kind of population density? So how do we qualify this? So I think these biases set in unconsciously. At least I want to take that as an escape route when I talk about my wife. So these biases set in unconsciously, and it in a lot of ways influences vast majority of our decisions. And it is not an HR person's problem alone. I think it's important for any line manager, anybody who manages a team, both ways. So in that sense, I would say it's not just gender or ethnicity based. These biases are formed out of our experiences, our interests in life. And so these biases are far more deeper, is the first point I have, beyond just race and ethnicity is what I feel. And that's why I think one of the things I really like in that book was he talks about closing your eyes concept. He says, when you interview somebody, can you just close your eyes and then just hear him out? Because he feels
do that.
Our eyes are a main entrance towards information bias. So so one of the things that we've done as part of this is to blind mark certain resumes. To say when we get resumes, blind mark them and say, take gender out of it, take race out of it, and how do we behave? So now I'm not, of course, an HR person. So if you talk to me in practical sense, what have we done as Synergy? Maybe that's a better way for me to put in. One is when we started taking in people, we said, let's have systematic processes before we get into those technical interviews. So we said, okay, can we carefully review his qualifications? Can we look at the scores in his education? Can we do a technical assessment score based on his job expectancy? Take some reference checks, and then do the psychometric assessment. Leave the standard tools. We use the Big Five model, which talks about openness, work ethic, which is called conscientiousness. Then we talk about extrovertedness, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Neuroticism is nothing but if you have high score, then how moody you are, stuff like that. And each of these are then subdivided into about 30 traits. So, and the beauty is that we have designed for each rank, what is the likelihood score on each of these. So, for example, if you take an engineer and if he has, he's not very high on extrovertedness, it's okay. But maybe for another position you want, you put somebody in an innovation space, and if he is not open, then you have perhaps a challenge. So things like this we did. And then we said, okay, once we got all this, your final technical interview is just to, validate the above. So try and put a mask, try and not only listen and say, can you validate some of this? So masking the resumes, take gender out, take all this out, and see, can you find, to what Prakash just said, there are many other skill sets that we need today in a ship operation. So how do we do that? So that's what we did. One. Second, we said, okay, this is not going so far. We said diversity has to be part of our organizational goals. So we said, we redefined this, took surveys, and we felt that a lot of people felt that this stereotypism is not allowing people to be in a manner that they want to be. So we said, okay, when we make this a priority, organizational priority, we wanted to have these town halls and said, we need this to have the attention that it deserves. And then said, okay, as a business leader, this is part of your key goal. So now each service center has a diversity target, whether it's about gender, whether it's about ethnicity, or whether it's about inclusivity, right? So we have offices in different locations, whether it's in Japan, in Korea, in China, and each of these offices have absolute 100% local talent, because it's not just on paper. I also feel the entire thought process is very different. I come from a small village in Kerala, when I've been brought up and wired in a particular way. And I'm reading a great book called Why Do We Sleep? And it keeps telling me how your neurons fire and build patterns in your brain. So it basically, you are wired over a lot of years. So this diversity also brings in some great thought processes. That's the other thing that we saw. Then we said, okay, women in shipping. I told you about the recent survey. We said stereotypes are holding people back. So we said, okay, can we create a global diversity committee? And before we even talk about putting people or women on board, can we create a gender sensitization curriculum? So we said, okay, we don't know about anything of this. We went to TIS, Tata Institute of Social Science, and we said, okay, can we build a curriculum? Okay, and then we are building this and we're trying this. The idea is that in a year's time, we want to open source this to any company, because we think it's an industry initiative and not just a specific company initiative. And then we said, okay, how do we then start building a women talent on board and ashore? So first statement we wanted to make was, can we have a ship that's commanded by a lady? And we got that done on a tanker, on a Suezmax tanker. And then we said, okay, can we get engineers now? And now the whole idea is we are setting a target for ourselves in 2021. We want the entire navigation team of women, because we have this unconscious bias that I have some marathon running partners who are women, and she beats me by miles by the time I finish marathon. So we have this, we climb mountains. I have some fellow climbers who are super strong, we just think that men are typically more stronger. I mean, I think that we need to undo some of that. Second, and the other thing that we are doing is, we said age is not a barrier. Okay? There are certain work that even if, say, for example, if you are of retirement age, we can value that experience and do something. There are certain positions where even maybe you are young, but you can still contribute. So we took that out. We said, okay, that's diversity, but how do we create a differently able workforce? So we had chief engineers working in different companies who got paralyzed and everything. And, they had tons of experience of sailing. So how do we bring them into the shore workforce and utilize them? We have today people who work in a wheelchair from home. Engineer, junior engineer, paralyzed down under, created a wheelchair that can help him, and then start working from home. He works from a small home in Cochin, actually. So how? And I think, like Prakash said, empathy being a part of our core value, and I know it's very close to every synergy, and so that, in a sense, help us to execute on building an inclusive environment, right? Because I personally believe empathetic leadership and employee belongingness are very critical, in my opinion, in building a diverse and inclusive workforce. And it's important to build happy teams. And I think that, like people say, culture basically eats strategy for breakfast. So if that's true, then how do we build that culture that believes in diversity, believes in inclusivity, believes in empathy? I think those are key pillar stones, and these are 5 or 6 things that we as Synergy, have done, and we're seeing great results. We're seeing great results, to be honest. We on the shore side, we have about, in the Philippines, we are 50-50. Maybe that's also the demographic that way. But in India, we are 36%. But I think we will get there. We have superintendents in India who are today women. So in the old stereotypes, and we've created this. To your second question,
how did you create these diverse teams? I mean, what did you consciously do? Because obviously you really have offices all over the world, and so how did you consciously create these diverse teams? What is the process that involved?
So I think like what Prakash said, one, you need to have the courage to call out and say, this is a change we are making because we believe that this is going to add value into the team. And then stay committed to that. Stay committed to saying, okay, I have made this, I have taken this bold step, and I feel that this is the right thing to do. And fortunately, like in ships and all, pay for the job basically, right? So because you have certain skills, you have certain qualifications, you're a third engineer, you're a master, you get paid as per this. The problem is ashore, where there is a little bit of that bias, and that's not just shipping, that's across all industries. But the good part is that in shipping they say we have 2% or 3% of women, so we are at a very nascent stage, which means we can make that change now, unlike many of the other industries which are a lot more difficult to make the change. So for shipping, it's a great opportunity. I see this as a great opportunity to make sure that we kind of take this delta away in terms of pay gap. So that's I have no HR gyan, but this is a little bit of my practical kind of 2 bits.
Thank you. In fact, they say men are from Mars and women are from Venus, but I think a couple of decades later, we'll find that there's no difference between the two because we are sort of merging so well with each other. But very, very interesting perspective and take. Thank you, Captain Unni. Unfortunately, we are sort of behind schedule, so I'm going to quickly go on to the next speaker, though I would love to have asked you a lot more questions, but because of time constraint, I'm going to go on to our next speaker. And our next member of the panelists is Kristine Leach. We welcome you.
I'm Kristine. I'm the Managing Director for Jotun Paints in India. It's a Norwegian company. We are over 90 years old. We develop, manufacture, and sell paint, coatings. We are here in India. We are the full complexity, so the full setup of decorative paints, protective coatings, kind of steel protection, powder coatings, and then last but not least, marine paints. So obviously we are a supplier into the marine sector. We have our headquarters here in Mumbai, which is where I am now. And we have our beautiful factory in Pune, which opened in 2008. We are about 400 plus people here in India. We are about 600 crore turnover plus. India is my 4th country to work in. Obviously in Norway, I am Norwegian. In the UK, I was in Malaysia for 4 years, and then now I've been in India for 3.5 years. I am a career-loving parent to 2 lovely boys, 2 very active boys. They are back home in Norway at the moment, so I'm here on my own. When it comes to the diversity journey, yes, it is equal measures personal as well as business related. When I took on this assignment here in India, I was like, yes, sounds great. We're going to go. Lovely, super exciting. And then I started to ask, the relevant business questions. And I sat down with my HR director and I said, so what's the gender ratio in the management team? And he went, it's you, madam. And I said, sorry, what? I didn't catch that. He said, it's you. It's you. I was like, okay. And he went, we've never had a woman in the management team before. So that was like, okay, all right. Change of thought a little bit. Okay, I know where we're at now. And then again, paints and coatings is very, very, very male dominated. And I started to travel around and meet customers. And I went down to Tamil Nadu and we saw a few customers, and then we drove 2 hours, on the roads in, and we were going to go and do a site visit. And we arrived on the site, and I could see the look on the people's faces that received us and me. And it was almost like they couldn't figure it out. So we had driven for 2 hours, and I was told to stand in a painted yellow square in the middle of the site. And I was, sorry, I don't understand what you mean. And he went, it's okay, man, just stand in the yellow square. And I was like, no, we're here, we're going to do a site visit. And my team equally baffled. And after 10 minutes of standing in this yellow square, I'm like, we'll just jump in the car and I don't really understand what's going on. Anyway, so my team stands behind, they chat a little bit and sit in the car. And I said, what happened? And they said, it's a big learning curve for us as well. But we only told them that our managing director is coming. Their expectation of what a managing director looks like and is was very different to the one that showed up. And for them, the site visit was safe enough for a man, but it wasn't safe enough for a woman to walk around. So then we drove 2 hours back after standing in the yellow square for 15 minutes. And that was also a huge learning curve for me in terms of manage expectations, and in a very, where the bias is that it is another gentleman that is going to come and do the site visit. So my team as well was like, this is a huge learning curve. Next time we have to make sure we also send your name and maybe a little bit of a, summary of who you are. But anyway, so then obviously the question starts of, I'm here to drive the business. I'm here to increase the profit and run the team. I'm not here purely for women empowerment. Should I take this on? Why should we do it now? We can do it in a year or two. And then it's a bit like, so if we don't do it now, then who's going to do it? If we don't do it now, then when? And this really, like both all of the other guys have said, this is a huge driver to the business. And I was reflecting on the team, both from sales and marketing and across the board. We have a big manufacturing site, and we were 3% women across the entire organization. It's nothing. And most importantly was that we had no women on site. For over 10 years, we didn't have a single woman working at our factory.
That's some statistic. Wow.
It is. And it's not one to necessarily shout about for the positive reason. It is one. So I was a bit like, I geared up, and I was in an all-male management team. And so I needed to plant the seed with them. And I was, gearing up, presentation, slides. And then literally 5 minutes in, they're like, Kristine, we agree. We need to move. And obviously that's the reason why we have been able to move, because it can't be seen as this woman on a mission and then the rest of it, we're ticking the boxes. But luckily I have a management team that are equally dedicated in seeing the business aspect of having a more diverse team. For us, the challenge was in particularly gender diversity. So we kind of started. And again, the other panelists as well have spoken about the importance of leadership and that this needs to come from the top. And yes, on the other side, there also needs to be a massive part of employee involvement in this. Leaders rotate, management team changes, and we needed to have a setup that was driving this independently of us together, but also independently. So we set up a dedicated diversity council that was kind of chosen of different locations within Jotun, India, different departments, obviously gender, age, background, experience as diverse, but the common factor was this passion for, we want to challenge the status quo. We want to ask the questions so that we can ensure Jotun India becomes a more diverse and an even more inclusive place to work going forward. So they were formed and set up and started to look at processes related to hiring, recruitment, retention, different diversities within different departments. And again, like a lot of you have mentioned as well, what gets measured gets done. We put the KPIs up on how are we going to do it, but what are we going to achieve? What's like this ultimate outcome that we are targeting? How are we going to get there? And then at the end of it, and obviously with setting the parameters, it was, diversity is one thing, but unless we really work on the inclusion part,
absolutely,
just filling it. We're filling it. The women are not going to feel comfortable and they're going to leave. Some of that experience had been done in the past. So we started to work on the inclusive part, and in particularly on the site. So we went so last year was 2019. We had been 11 years in India. And last year, November, we had 11 women starting working on the shop floor. Utilizing the talent and what we were able to get from the local villages and say, come and try. I know it's chemical, it's not very feminine, it's paint, it's not super sexy, but trust me, this is a great place to work. So they came, they started, we did a full induction, really upskilled them. And then it's like, how can we get them to stay? So before they all joined, we needed to get female toilets operating again inside the site. They redid the female toilets in the admin building when I came to India because they weren't really working because there weren't really any women there anyway. And now we had to do the same, so that the infrastructure inclusion part had to be there. Is the environment feeling welcoming? Do they have their own place, locker rooms, everything, that they feel this is safe and somewhere they're comfortable? And then it's more on the behavioral inclusion part. So we run, because again, we have to acknowledge that these guys, these great, talented men that had been on the site, had been working without a female co-partner or a female colleague for 11 years. And all of a sudden, these women came in. So we did gender sensitivity training of how do we work together? How do we speak a language that is comfortable for everyone? How do we treat and respect each other? So everyone went through the gender sensitivity training, obviously the sexual harassment training, and all of those boxes were ticked as well, but kind of go over and above that. How can we create an inclusive work environment? And I'm very happy to say that they are still there. They're on the site. We have started to upskill them. They don't do different tasks than the men. They are now running the lines on their own. They're driving the trucks and they're full on in. We had the pleasure of having the Norwegian Consulate General visiting our site last week. And there they are presenting, talking about how they have been a part of increasing efficiency on site. And it's just such a, you know, personal, amazing, just the feeling of seeing them thriving in an environment that we have been a very smart part of facilitating. So it's been a fantastic journey. Another part was we saw we're going to make men more accountable at work. We need to make women. We're going to make women more accountable at work. We need to make men more accountable at home. So same as what they did in Maersk, we introduced parental leave for fathers. You know, really highlighting that kids need two parents. You know, and we want to try and facilitate that. We want to be a part of also allowing, not pushing them, but allowing them to take time home with their family when the opportunity arises. So we have taken the percentage from 3 to 9. It's been trebled. It's still not good enough. We have a long way to go, but it's definitely moving in the right direction. I think a challenge for us operating in manufacturing chemical paint is we have a very low number of female applicants. So we are now consciously working on, we need to target 100% of the talent pool that is available in India. And my word, there are some talented, fierce women here, and we need to be able to attract them better than what we are doing at the moment, so that we can get to the point where we have 50-50 of qualified talents that we can then put through the recruitment process.
So interesting. And I'm sure at the end of it all, you'll feel it's your personal victory when you achieve, you know, when you include more women in your workforce, be it manufacturing or be it sales or whatever. I'm sure you will feel a sense of personal accomplishment.
I will feel a sense of personal passion. The accomplishment and the victory is not mine, because it's the team. And it's equally men and women, but the fact that they are seeing the tangible business impact. 2019 was a great year financially for Jotun India, and it was such a people-centric, diversity-focused year. You're really proving the fact that, you know, people want to deliver if they are given the opportunity to do that.
I think one of the things that comes out very clearly in what you said and what all of you said, it's diversity and inclusion. It has to be both.
The company is 20 years old. It's one of 3 terminals in the port of Colombo, and it was the first ever public-private partnership. So it is a kind of a trailblazer. The 2 main shareholders, one is a large local listed group, John Keels, and the other is the AP Moller Group. So AP Moller is a shareholder as well, yes. And together with the government of Sri Lanka, and we have Evergreen, who's also a small shareholder. But we come from a situation in the ports industry here, and in Sri Lanka in particular. If you look at Sri Lanka, female participation, diversity really for us is all about trying to equate the gender balance in the organization. And that's a national priority as well, because in Sri Lanka, we have barely 30% of female participation in the workforce overall. And this is with where we have an average, our total eligible workforce is about 51% of whom are females. But having said that, women play a huge role in some of our largest industries, but almost nothing in some of the other industries, like in the port. So if I take the port industry, it's under 1%. Ports and shipping would be under 1% female participation. And this is very largely traditional. It's historical, to the point that it's so stereotypical that there's legislation that existed over a century ago that is still in force today, convention and administrative circulars, where women can't even come into the port after 6 o'clock in the evening.
Even today?
Even today. Administratively, the circular, the practice still exists. So we operate 24 hours. So it's unthinkable that a woman can be employed on a shift that works through the night. We can't, and we don't, and we have a situation where whilst in this backdrop, we also have the stereotype of the job itself. I mean, port workers are not women. There have been no, despite the fact that we have massive barriers that are being broken even in places like the Middle East, where we have women crane operators and women gate clerks, and in China and in the Far East, it's quite common. And certainly, I'm sure in Europe, there are many job roles that have females. Here, it's fairly unthinkable. So we start off with this huge, not only administrative and historical and stereotypical backdrop, but we also start off with a fairly large resistance from within the current workforce as well, where there is this perception that, you know, a port is not a place where a woman needs to work or should be working. So in this backdrop, SAGT has around 2% of our total workforce are women. Just barely, 2 years ago was barely under 2%. We've started changing that over the last 2 years. We've doubled that. I mean, I saw Jotun had tripled it from 3 to 9. We've gone from 2 to 4. But we still have a situation where we've set ourselves some fairly ambitious targets. And we've said that by 2025, we want to achieve 30%. So that's going from 4% today to near 10 times or 8 times what we have. Because every single job on the terminal really is very capable of being handled by a woman. And we think, and we have seen that when we add diversity, all the women we've had so far have only been in office-based jobs. And for the first time in the last 1 year, we've added female engineers. So we have now women engineers who are working on cranes. Now, these are quantum leaps. We know that technology is available today and will become a great enabler where we don't have, where women can operate any type of equipment remotely and much easier. But there's no reason at all, even in the current context, where any of the jobs that are currently being done by men. This is the premise that we are working with. And we've sort of started a bit of a journey here where we've also joined a program with the International Finance Corporation and the governments of Australia to see what we call Women in Work. It's a She Works program where we've become part of an employer organization that actually looks for ways and means of how we increase female participation. We haven't even got to other areas of diversity yet that are beyond just the gender balance. So we've done a few breakthrough things in the last sort of 12 months. We've installed a policy. Now it seems it is normal in most other businesses, but in a port context, it's highly unusual. We've installed a policy against sexual harassment. Now, it wasn't ever necessary in a port because there was almost no need for it. just acceptance of that was a real challenge, getting people to really sign and understand that you could do this and could not do this, and that body language. And we've also launched a whistleblower policy where we encourage people, whether it's anonymous or written or otherwise. So we are taking these very, very small steps in order to try. And as you mentioned, Kristine, we have, for us, it's also the huge challenge of creating locker rooms, creating additional toilets, creating spaces for women where we induct women into a predominantly male, 98% male environment. So these are, and I must say there is a lot of support now, given the massive emphasis on diversity, on the diversity agenda within the shipping and the maritime community. So this is where we are. We were kind of a trailblazer 20 years ago in the way in which we ran the terminal business, and we are trying very hard to see if we can set the benchmark and raise the bar here from a diversity angle as well in terms of a gender balance. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to.
Thank you, Romesh. That was again so enlightening, and I mean, coming from a company where you had 2% women representation and trying to take it up further is really, I mean, it's a beginning, but everyone has to begin somewhere. And we wish you all the very best in this endeavor. Gentlemen, we are hopelessly out of time. Thank you both for your time. It's really been such a beautiful session, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Happy Diwali.